It's okay. Sometimes we just need to hear those words. It's okay. When we don't know what to do, when we're lost for words, when we feel like the world is crashing down around us, when we feel like we're in the dry desert of life, it's okay. Hey everyone, my name is Tyler Roberts and I'm the Life Group Director here at Cornerstone. I'm so excited to be able to share this morning's message with you. I have a question for you before we jump in. Are you okay? You know, we get asked that quite often and we give a couple different responses. Sometimes we just are in a rush to get through that conversation, so we say, yeah, I'm okay. And other times, you know, we actually pause and we think, and if we're honest, we could say, you know, we're not okay. And you know what's interesting about that, when we say, I'm not doing okay, it sometimes surprises the person we're telling that to. Are you okay? I heard this song by this artist named Chandler Moore the other day, and it goes like this. I won't pretend, I say what I'm feeling. I'm overwhelmed. Are you feeling overwhelmed right now? Emotions are raging. It's okay to not be okay. I won't try to hide. Love leaves room for me to say, I'm not okay. To every fear, every lie, I know that love leaves room for me to say, you leave room for me to say, oh, you leave room for me. Yeah, I loved those lyrics because when I think about my relationship with God and my journey with God, I can honestly say that God leaves room for me to feel good and happy and excited about different things in life. But my relationship with God, my journey with God has also seen that God leaves room for me to not feel okay, to go through the tough moments of life. And so today we're going to look at a Bible passage in Psalm where David, he's not okay. And I want to talk about that because I believe David took some steps in his relationship with God that I think would be beneficial for us to take when we're just going through life struggles and pains. But before I do that, I want to share with you how this message is one that I've personally lived. So I want to start back in 2009. There's a picture that's going to come up on the screen, and you're going to see young high school Tyler. You know, have you ever looked at a picture and thought to yourself, what would I say to my younger self? You know, one of the first things I might say when looking back at that picture is, Tyler, why did you have that type of hair? Like, cut it, do something different with it. And it's so funny for me to look at that, but I also see myself in that picture, the excitement for life, life's journey that's ahead. And part of my story is the fact that I grew up going to church ever since I was young. My parents started taking me to church when I was 5 years old, maybe even younger than that, I think maybe 3 years old. And so church culture and growing up in the church was just a normal experience for me. And I was like that church kid where one of the only times I got in trouble was at this junior high event, and we were playing this game called Capture the Leader. And we were running in the church parking lot, and I grabbed one of the leaders by the sweater, pulled him down, and as I did that, there was this police car driving on the highway, looked over and saw all these junior hires running around the church parking lot, and he thought there was a gang fight taking place. And so they came and they had talked to us, and that was part of my experience in growing up in the church, just having fun and loving every bit of it. And then from that point on, I continued to be involved in doing things with the church. In 2010, I went on a mission trip to Brazil, and that trip changed my life. It was because of that trip I knew that I wanted to be in ministry and tell people about Jesus. So from there, I went to college, and I went to Evangel University, and I had a great experience. But one of the best things that happened to me while at Evangel is I met my wife, Megan. And after being at Evangel and graduating, we were youth pastors in Connecticut. And shortly after that, we got married. And then we were enjoying life, loving where we're at, and then we found out we were going to have a baby. Hudson. Some of you have seen him. He's all crazy boy, and he's awesome. And so from there, we moved back to California. And now this is the part of my story that I really want to dig into, because I share that first part to you because it's important to kind of see the journey that I was on. Things were good. Things were awesome. There wasn't too much struggle. And then when we moved back to California, and I take another job, things started to feel dry. I wasn't happy in my job. I was miserable at work. We didn't have the community that we thought we would have. I felt like I was in the dry desert season of my life. And on top of this, COVID hit in the middle of me being at that job. And so things were tough, things were hard. And the crazy thing is, if you were to look at my Facebook posts, Instagram posts, things looked normal. I looked happy. Actually, there's a picture that's coming up right now that shows my son and the beautiful gift that God gave us. And he's smiling, and you think that, man, you have a great life. Why did you feel miserable? Why did you feel bad inside? And then another picture of us is our family in Germany, and we're smiling and happy. And that's what it looked like from the outside. But on the inside, it looked like something like this. Yeah, that's right. Not so happy, not so sure of myself, confused, a little hurt. And in the midst of all of this, I was sitting in a sermon, and this pastor was preaching on 1 Thessalonians 5:16 through 18. And I was listening in this moment of feeling unhappy and in being hurt and in pain. And I thought to myself while I was listening to this message, how do I rejoice always when I feel so miserable? How do I pray continually when life feels so spiritually dry that I wonder if I'll make it out of this desert and into the promises that God has for me? And on top of this, I sure don't feel like giving thanks in my circumstance right now. What do you do when you feel this way? When things should be okay, when you have a beautiful family, when you're doing the job that you always thought you would want to do, what do you do when you just don't feel okay? First, I need to say, it's okay. Sometimes we just need to hear those words. It's okay. When we don't know what to do, when we're lost for words, when we feel like the world is crashing down around us, when we feel like we're in the dry desert of life, it's okay. Today, we're going to jump right into Psalm chapter 3, and we're going to look at David's life when things were crashing down around him, when things weren't okay for him, when things were upside down. And let's take a look about how he responded to God in those seasons. So Psalm chapter 3, it starts off like this: a psalm of David when he fled from his son Absalom. Let's stop right there real quick. When he fled from his son Absalom. That sounds a little crazy. Why would a father be running away from his son? So this story takes place in 2 Samuel, where we see that David is the king. He is in the position that God had called him to be in. He had finally made it to where he finally made and fulfilled the promises that God had worked out for him. And his son revolts against him. He sways the empire against his own father. And David's reaction to this news is something like this: come, we must flee. None of us will escape from my son Absalom. We must leave immediately, or he will quickly overtake us and bring ruin upon us to the city. David had just heard a report that his son had taken over the hearts of the people. And now David is quickly realizing he needs to leave. He needs to flee the city. And you may be asking yourself, why is he doing that? Well, there was two reasons why. First was food and supplies. You know, at that time, that was one of the biggest strongholds in the Near East. And you would maybe think to yourself, why didn't David just bunker down and just hold it out when his son was attacking the city? Well, he didn't have time to prepare. It came out of nowhere. His son revolts and his rebelling against his father. It wasn't something that David saw coming. And so he didn't have time to gather enough food and supplies to be able to hunker down. And I bring that up because when we're in the dry seasons of life, when we don't know what to do, when it's not okay, it seems to come out of nowhere, right? We don't have the time to prepare and get ready for those moments. And that's why they always hit us the hardest. And that's why there's always the pain that's associated with it, because it was a jolt that we weren't expecting. And the next reason why David decided to flee was because of military weakness. You see, David had a core group of professional mercenaries that were around him that could protect him, but they weren't enough to hold back the vast army that Absalom had assembled to fight against his father. And real quick before we move on, I want to point out David had people around him. When it's not okay, when the world is crashing around you, you need people around you. You need community. And we see that David had a small community, but he had community. And so maybe you're watching this, and one of the first things I want to encourage you with is we believe here at Cornerstone that you can engage in beautiful, great community here online. And through the chat function and through prayer with one of our admins, you can engage in a beautiful community. And from there, if you live in this area, maybe that can extend to coming to our campus, or maybe even a life group, or maybe even an online group. I just want to stress the need for community. And so from there, David, because of these two things, David knew that he had to leave, he had to flee. And so he decided to leave the city, and now David is in the desert. And he's destroyed inside. He's probably thinking, I am not going to win the Best Father of the Year award. My very own son has taken the kingdom away from me. And he's in the desert, and he doesn't know what to do. And so we see in the rest of Psalm chapter 3, this is where he wrote these words. When everything's crashing around him, that he says this in Psalm chapter 3. Lord, how many are my foes? How many rise up against me? Many are saying of me, God will not deliver him. But you, Lord, are a shield around me, my glory, the one who lifts up my head. I call to the Lord, and he answers me from the holy mountain. I lie down and sleep, and I wake again because the Lord sustains me. I will not fear the tens of thousands that assail me on every side. Arise, Lord, deliver me, my God. Strike my enemies on the jaw and break the teeth of the wicked. From the Lord comes deliverance. May your blessing be on your people. You know, in the screen, you'll see in a few moments, you'll see a few takeaways that I hope that you walk away just feeling empowered by in this message. There are 3 takeaways I hope you get out of this message this morning, and I want to conclude with a challenge that you can walk away with. We see that David did 3 things when he cried out to God in the wilderness. The first is this: he lamented. So our first takeaway is, it's okay to tell God how hard it is. We see David say, Lord, how many are my foes? How many rise up against me? Many are saying of me that God will not deliver him. David laments, and he tells God how hard it is, that there's enemies surrounding him and rising up against him. And what's worse is his own son. And so fathers, just anybody that's watching this, the perfect thing to do when you feel like enemies are surrounding you, when you don't know what to do, is to tell God about it. David doesn't shy away from the fact that he feels like he's pressed on every side from those who hate him. You know, in Western culture and here in America, we don't normally practice the art of lamenting or just telling God how hard it is. But in David's time, that was a daily practice of what they did. And actually, lamenting was such a common practice. What they would do is they would hire professional lamenters. Now, wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't that be nice if that's how we could handle it? If we say, you know what, life is hard. I don't know what to do. Work is tough. I don't know how to interact with my family. My relationship with my spouse isn't the way I want it to be. My relationship with my kids isn't how I want it to be. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep on doing what I need to do, and I'm going to hire so-and-so to be sad for me. We can't do that. We can't do that because it's actually not healthy. Let's do what David did. David doesn't hire a professional lamenter. He doesn't hire someone to just tell God how hard it is. What David does is he personally goes before God and says, God, life's tough. When I was in the desert season of life, when I was in California and I was not happy with where I was at, I would complain. I would complain to everyone. You know, I would come home from work and I would go to Megan and I would say, Megan, can you believe what happened today? Can you believe what so-and-so did? Can you believe that this, and I would just complain. I would hold up my son and say, Hudson, can you believe? Everybody. And one day I was talking to my mentor and he asked me, he said, "Yeah, you've been talking to everybody else about this issue. Have you talked to God?" And I thought about it and I'm like, nope, I have not. Have you told God how this season is? And maybe you're watching this right now on your computer or wherever you're watching and you're thinking to yourself, I haven't told God about what I'm going through. I want to challenge you to do so. Too many times we tell everyone else how hard it is, but we don't talk to God. You see, David, he knew who to cry out to in his desert season. So our first takeaway for today is it's okay to tell God how hard it is. The second is this: David, he confessed his trust in God. Our second takeaway is it's okay to trust God. But you, Lord, are a shield around me, my glory, the one who lifts my head high. I call to the Lord, and he answers me from his holy mountain. I lie down and sleep, and I wake again, because the Lord sustains me. I will not fear the tens of thousands that assail me on every side. It's okay to trust God. You know, I moved my family in the middle of a pandemic. It was crazy. People would be like, "Tyler, what are you doing?" But I knew that God was moving me to New Jersey and I was going to put my trust in him. You see, David acknowledges the Lord's special protection. Back to my earlier illustration, I would come home miserable. And one day, someone asked me, "Do you trust God? Do you trust God that he has your life in his hands? Do you trust God?" You know, sadly, life's conflicts become the baseline of our existence when it ought to be our trust in the Lord. I would come home and I would think about my day and how hard it was and how annoyed I was. And one day I thought to myself, the people that I'm annoyed with, they're not losing sleep over any of this. Why am I losing sleep over this? That was the moment everything changed for me. I made the choice to trust God and rather make my work conflicts and personality clashes and things in the end that didn't matter and make those the baseline of my existence. I decided that I would trust in the Lord. You see, we see that David, he counters the claim in verse 3. It says, "Many are saying of me that God will not deliver him." And we see that David acknowledged that God will deliver him and that he's going to put his trust in God. Life's crises renew our faith in the God who answers from his holy mountain. And you see, we have a shield that has already gone before us. And so there may be some of you that are watching that you don't know who Jesus is. You don't know who God is. And I want to tell you that Jesus went before us as a shield and he took on sin so that we can be in a relationship with God, so that you can have a trust in God. And so maybe you're here and you're saying, "You know what? I don't know God, but I want to." Well, I want to let you know that you can reach out to one of our pastors. If you're watching this from our website, you can reach out through chat and receive prayer, and you can start that journey of trusting in God. It's okay to tell God how hard it is, and it is okay to trust God. Lastly, we see David say, it's okay to ask God for help. "Arise, Lord, deliver me, my God. Strike my enemies on the jaw and break the teeth of the wicked. From the Lord comes deliverance. May your blessings be on your people." We see that David acknowledges that deliverance comes from the Lord. Joy came after I decided I wasn't going to wait until my circumstances got better to be happy. Even in the midst of the dry season, where I questioned God and his plan for me, I chose joy. But that's not where it ended. I asked God to get me the heck out of California. I was like, get me out of here because I don't want to live here. And that's the thing. It's good to choose to be happy. It's good to choose joy. But a lot of times we need to ask God for help. We need to ask people around us for help to move us on beyond what we were facing, and so we don't go back to not having joy in our hearts. And so I started asking God for specific things. See, I told you earlier, I had lived in Connecticut at one time, and I had missed living in the Northeast. And I started getting specific in my prayers to God. I said, God, I don't want to live in California anymore. I want to live in the Northeast. I wanted to continue my role of discipleship. I didn't want to go back into youth ministry. I didn't want to do something else in the church. I didn't want to not work in the church. I wanted to continue working in the church. I got specific in my prayers and asked God for help. This is to the fathers out there. Get specific when you pray for your kids and when you pray for your spouse. We see David doing the same thing. He said, God, deliver me. Strike my enemies on the jaw. That's crazy. He's like, God, take them out. There's armies surrounding me. Strike them on the jaw. Break the teeth of the wicked. And from the Lord comes deliverance. And the concluding verses, there's a combination of trust and blessing. And one thing we need to remember is that circumstances bring us to prayer. If David wasn't on the run from his son, he may not have written this prayer that we just went through. You know, when we found out we were going to have Hudson, we started praying like crazy. You know, I think most parents do. We started praying that he'd be healthy, that he'd be born with no complications. And we went to the doctors, and they were like, hey, when they did the ultrasound, and they were like, hey, your son's head is a little big. Should we continue to do a little bit more tests? And, you know, we were like, we're praying that he's going to be a healthy baby boy. We're praying that God has all things, he has everything worked out for our good. So no, we don't need to do any more tests. And so he was born healthy. The only thing that was a little different was his head was massive. It was huge. And if you see him now, you'll see that his head's still big. And he takes after me because my head's really big. But we got specific in our prayers when we found out he was going to be born, and we prayed for a healthy, beautiful baby boy. Because I was specific in my prayers, I didn't just go to any job when I was leaving California. And I ended up here at Cornerstone. What a blessing. Are all things perfect here at Cornerstone and in the job I'm working? No, they're not. But here's the thing. When we get this lesson down, when we say, God, I'm going to choose joy, and I'm going to choose to look beyond my circumstances, and I'm going to choose to go to you in all my circumstances, we can learn the lesson that even in the midst of chaos, even in the dry desert season, we can learn from God. But more importantly, we can learn that we got to make a choice to move beyond that. And I don't know what that looks like for some of you. Some of you, you need to take an action after choosing joy. It's okay to tell God how hard it is. It's okay to trust God, and it's okay to ask God for help. It's okay. Finally, I want to leave you with all of us with a challenge. Psalm 3 ends with a blessing. May your blessing be on your people. In the midst of David's own personal crisis, he prayed for others. We have all been called by Jesus to love God and love others. My question and my challenge for each and every one of you watching this, specifically mainly for Christians, those who profess a faith in Christ, are you doing that? Are you loving God, and are you loving others well? You saw a couple pictures of us in Germany earlier on. A couple years ago, my family and I went to Germany, and I want to tell you two stories that really hit home this idea of loving others and applying what we learned today to real life. So we were in Munich. I was starving. I don't know about you guys, but when I'm hungry, I get angry. And I don't get angry often, but it comes when I'm hungry. And so we had just finished looking around in Munich, and I looked at Megan, I'm like, hey, we gotta get to Neuschwanstein, and you'll see the castle on the screen. It's a beautiful place. And let's leave, let's get on the road, and let's just stop at McDonald's on the way. And Megan's like, we're in Germany. Why would we stop at McDonald's? And I was like, yeah, but I want to get to Neuschwanstein. Let's just go. And Megan's like, no, let's just find something nearby. And I'm like, okay, Megan, find something. And so she looks on her phone and she finds this place. And so it was like a mile away. And so we start walking. We have Hudson, he's on my back. I'm hungry, I'm tired. I want to get to my destination. And we get to the place that Megan found, and it was closed. And I'm looking at Megan, I'm like, Megan, it's closed. And before you start giving Megan grace, and she deserves grace, but before you start doing that, it looked like it had been closed for like 5+ years. Like, I don't know why Google had led us to this place. It looked like it's not been a business for a while. And I'm like, Megan, what? And so there was a little argument, and there was, let's get out of here. So we find a place to eat. We get to the parking garage, and we get to the car, and I'm kind of like, okay, let's go. We got to get to our destination. And Megan's like, so I pay for the parking ticket. We get to our car, and Megan's like, I gotta feed Hudson. And I'm like, oh, I just want to get out of here. And so Megan feeds Hudson. We start up the car, we drive. As we're driving and leaving the parking lot, I back up, my mirror gets knocked out of the car from one of the columns. I'm angry at this moment. We get to the place where to get out of the parking garage. I pull up, put the ticket in. It won't let me out. We had waited too long in the garage from when I paid for it to when we actually are leaving. And I look and I'm like, okay, I'll back out and I'll go pay again. There's a line of cars behind us. Good thing I wasn't in New Jersey because people would be honking and all that stuff. But they were a little nicer in Germany, I guess. No one was honking. And this guy comes up, and in German, he starts talking. And I'm like, I don't speak German. And he quickly switches to English, and he's like, hey, are you guys okay? And I tell him, hey, we paid for the parking ticket, and it won't let us out. And so he says something to the person on the other side of the little box, and the garage thing opens, and we leave. We're driving down the road, and all of a sudden on the road, there's these barricades. And I don't know what these barricades mean because there's these German words on them. And I start driving around them barricades. And then all of a sudden this crane puts its arm in front of our car, like this tractor, and says, we gotta go a different way. So I turn, and I'm driving down this road, and before I know it, I'm on this random guy's property, this farm in the middle of Germany. And I'm trying to get to my destination, and I'm on this random guy's property. And I'm driving down this small little country road, and this guy in this tractor drives up to us, and he starts yelling at me in German. And I look and I'm like, hey, do you speak English? And he starts yelling at me even more in German. And I'm like, okay, I guess this isn't helpful, and we leave. We finally get to our destination after some craziness. But I tell you these two stories, well, really one story, but two instances where we interact with two different people, because I'm afraid that too many times as Christians, we act like that angry farmer. We interact with people we don't understand. And when people get where they shouldn't be getting, or when people are lost and they don't know where to go to God, my question for us is, how are we responding? Are we responding like that first person in the parking garage where he was very helpful, kind? Or are we responding like that farmer, where in our frustrations and we don't understand exactly what they're saying, we're kind of missing some things, they live a different way than us, and yet we don't have grace for them? You may say to yourself, I'm 1,000% justified in my response. And you might be. But you see, that farmer, even though I was on his property, and he was completely justified with being angry with me, he wasn't helpful at all. Let us respond like that friendly man, where when I was speaking a different language, he was quick to speak my language and be helpful. When we say to our kids, non-Christians, family members, coworkers, come to us. My hope and challenge is for you that you will be the type of people to say this. That those people in our lives will be the people that say, it's okay to tell that Christian I know in my life my problems. It's okay to trust that Christian, that person, my coworker in my life. And lastly, it's okay to ask so-and-so who's a Christian for help. It's okay. So here's how you can respond today. Tell God your problems. If you're watching on our website, you can jump in one of our prayer chats and talk to God, talk to someone, ask for a prayer request. Second is this: start trusting God. If you're here and you do not have a relationship with Jesus today, jump on our chat, reach out to one of our pastors, and we would be glad to talk to you about what it means to have a relationship with Christ. And the third is this: talk to God and tell someone here that you need help. Because in the chaos of life, when everything looks good on the outside, but inside you're not feeling okay, you need to talk to God and you need to talk to someone. And lastly, the challenge. If you're here and you felt challenged by the final two illustrations of the happy guy in Munich or the angry farmer, ask God to help you embody his character outside these walls. Let's pray. Lord, I just thank you that we can come to you when things aren't okay. And it's okay not to feel okay. I pray that we'll respond how David responded in the midst of his dry desert season of life. When his son was rallying against him, he responded to you. And my heart is today that we'll respond to you with these challenges and these takeaways. In your name. And all God's people said, amen.